This is Hong Kong. Interestingly, it was all over the news that Hong Kong is planning to spend up to $80 billion on one of the world's largest artificial island projects. Hong Kong is currently faced with a housing problem. In 2016, the Hong Kong government predicted that the city would face a housing shortage of approximately 12,000 hectares over the next 30 years. In 2021, the housing shortage was increased to 3,000 hectares over the next 30 years. We may be convinced that the artificial island project will go a long way in tackling the region's housing problem. But the question is, how large will this artificial island be? Does Hong Kong really need the housing project? Is water encroachment really a good idea? Watch till the end of this video to find out. It's encouraging to hear that the Hong Kong government has begun a new chapter in its survival manual. We recently learned that the government plans to spend $80 billion to create a living environment out of the naturally blessed water bodies surrounding their territory. The government claims that the project will alleviate the territory's housing crisis. Still, critics claim it'll only cause financial and environmental problems. However, it was interesting to learn that the government intends to join the ranks of artificial island owners and intend to set a record with this project. The Hong Kong government stated that the project will be built on 1,000 hectares off Hong Kong's biggest island, Lantau. When most people are asked what they think Hong Kong looks like, they envision the cityscapes dominated by towering skyscrapers, shiny new sports cars, and the lavish lifestyles of the city's million ultra-rich residents. Hong Kong is indeed the world's wealthiest city. Hong Kong is home to approximately 93 billionaires, and 1 in every 7 residents is a millionaire. Despite the city's wealth, the housing crisis in Hong Kong is a major concern. While Hong Kong is proud to be short to the world's wealthiest people, inequality is at its peak point in 45 years. 1 in every 5 Hong Kong residents lives below the city's poverty line. The richest families can earn almost 50 times what the lowest income family can. People on opposite ends of the wealth spectrum has vastly different experiences. Many regard Hong Kong to be the world's most expensive city, with the most expensive real estate in the world for more than a century. In contrast, the wealthy communities appears to maintain luxury and wealth derived from its real estate investment, while the poor struggle to find shelter. The housing problem in Hong Kong is undoubtedly one of the city's most pressing issues. The average property price is nearly $3,200 per square foot, and the average apartment costs around $1.28 million. A tiny nano apartment in Hong Kong can cost up to $500,000. The monthly rent for nearly half of the city's apartment units is $2,550, which would be about 122% of the average monthly wage. Clearly, if the government does not intervene in the housing bully, the city may be forced to see the majority of its workforce relocate to other areas simply to earn a living. The Hong Kong government has long struggled with the issue of housing. They must develop a long-term housing plan every year that includes housing for the following 10 years. Back, the Hong Kong government set a 60% and 40% respectively public and subsidized housing over private housing goal in 2014. 2018 saw a change in the government's goal, which is now 70% public and 30% private. According to this ratio, the government expects to build 450,000 homes in the 10 years following 2018, 315,000 of which will be public and 135,000 of which will be private. Hong Kong has a history of reclamation. Approximately 6% of the city's land is reclaimed and is home to 27% of its population. Since the 1970s, Hong Kong has built 9 towns, including Tuen Mun, Sha Tin, Sin Quan O. The majority require extensive reclamation. It's not limited to Hong Kong. Artificial islands are increasingly being sold to the world as solutions to some of the most pressing housing issues that cities face, especially for cities that are plagued with overcrowding and rising property prices. Singapore has used reclamation to increase its landmass by 25%, allowing it to compete with Hong Kong in terms of residential and commercial property prices. Meanwhile, Dubai's Palm Islands were built to boost the number of premium waterfront land available. boosting the city's tourism economy and attracting luxury hotels and resorts and the ultra-rich. The Land Television Tomorrow scheme is set to begin construction in 2025, with the first residents expected to move in 7 years later in 2032. According to the government, the lands could house up to 260,000 people. More than 70% of them would be set aside for public housing in one of the largest, most populous, and least affordable cities. However, critics have warned that the cost, which is equivalent to more than half of the territory's total financial reserves, could financially cripple Hong Kong. With only 2 points, one could argue that Hong Kong may just require the artificial island to rise, the state of the public health, and the recent campaign to build greenhouse buildings. Despite the immense scientific evidence pointing to the impact of global warming today, health policy agendas around the world are now realizing how serious a public health threat change in climate poses to humanity. In Hong Kong, for every degree Celsius above 29 degrees Celsius, hospitalization rates rise by nearly 5%, and mortality rates rise by nearly 2%, resulting in approximately 1,000 more yearly mortalities. This is because rising temperatures indicate rising greenhouse gas emissions, and these gases have significant impacts on heart, lungs, and skin health. Many people experience dizziness during the hot summer months, and this has called for the creation of greenhouse buildings. One of the most significant benefits of greenhouse buildings is our climate and natural environment. Greenhouse buildings not only minimize or remove negative environmental impacts by using less water, energy, or environmental assets, but they also have a positive environmental impact by generating their own electricity or increasing biodiversity. The Hong Kong government unveiled the Climate Action Plan 2050 in 2021, outlining 4 major decarbonization strategies, namely net zero electricity generation, energy saving and green buildings, green transport, and waste reduction, which would lead Hong Kong to carbon neutrality before 2050. It also establishes more aggressive interim decarbonization targets, with the goal of cutting Hong Kong's greenhouse gas emissions in half by 2035 compared to 2005 levels. So looking at this from the fight for survival point of view, the Hong Kong government might be investing $80 billion to change the standard of living of its citizens and also provide them with affordable housing options. Of course, that's if they include the public health and climate change factors into their planning considerations. Before we go any further, don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel, Techno Global Innovation. Now, let's return to the video. Is water encroachment really a good idea? As things stand, water encroachment may not be such a good idea. Environmentalists argue that the project is both harmful and unnecessary. The endangered pink dolphins in the area may be particularly vulnerable to construction work. Greenpeace and the World Wildlife Fund argue that Hong Kong officials should first build on more than 1,200 hectares of brownfield sites, which are polluted but could be cleaned up for reconstruction. We recently discovered that the COVID-19 pandemic would be remembered fondly by wildlife. According to reports, Chinese white and pink dolphins began avoiding Chinese borders some time ago due to the large number of speedboats that typically inhabit the waters. However, the dolphins have returned because of the pandemic and human quarantining, discovering that they now have the waterways almost entirely to themselves. Pink dolphins are threatened by industrial activities and human attacks on wildlife. The creature has been staying away from Chinese borders for so long that people began to believe it was going extinct. The placement of these animals in this area has made many people happy. Still, there's widespread concern that if the government decides to proceed with the island project, these animals will be forced to leave this area once more, possibly never to be seen again within Hong Kong's borders. Pink dolphins are the last of 5 river dolphin species. The others are nearly extinct. According to Brazilian scientists, their percentages have decreased dramatically since 2000. According to researchers, these species are disappearing at a 10% annual rate. The International Union for Conservation of Nature, a non-governmental organization based in Gland, Switzerland, has classified them as endangered species. Some Greenpeace activists believe that if the Hong Kong government is willing to carry out a reasonable reclamation project, The development of brownfield sites has widespread public support and is less expensive. For over a century, Hong Kong has been reclaiming land from the sea. Recent reclamation projects include building the international airport, which was constructed on an artificial island over 2 decades ago. However, the Lantau would be the most expensive project to date. Many people have taken to the streets to oppose the artificial island plans. The Save Lantau Alliance campaign group has issued a leaflet criticizing the project for wasteful spending, environmental devastation, and a lack of consultation. It also claims that the massive residential construction is unnecessary because, while the population is still growing, it's expected to level off by the middle of the century. According to some experts, Hong Kong's population will peak at 8.22 million in 2043 and then decline to 7.6 million in 2064. Despite the decline in population, the government intends to justify the growth and increase the land reserves for this phantom population. Wong stated that the Hong Kong government could afford annual costs of up to $63 billion and that the initial investment will be repaid. He cited an institute of surveyors estimated that potential land revenue from artificial islands would be at least $1.2 trillion. Just over half of the projected costs will go toward the new artificial islands, with the remainder going toward transportation infrastructure, which authorities hope to complete before the first residents move in. According to Wong, the islands would be built to withstand the effects of climate change, which would be a major concern in a city vulnerable to sea level rises. The new land would be at least as high as Hong Kong Airport, which is 19 feet above sea level and survived Super Typhoon Mangkhut last year. In addition to the airport, Lantau Island is home to a new mega bridge billed as the world's longest sea bridge, which opened in 2018 and connects Hong Kong to neighboring Macau and mainland China at a time when Beijing is tightening its grip on its semi-autonomous territories. As a part of the Vision Tomorrow plan, Hong Kong officials recently laid out a plan for another 700-hectare artificial island needed Lantau, but not released any further details about the timing or cost of that construction work. The Chinese government has made clear over the past 25 years the zero tolerance for treason and counter-government protest. We all know that except for miraculous intervention, they will certainly do everything to see that they build this artificial island. However, looking at the bigger picture, the project will greatly benefit Hong Kong citizens in the long run, but most likely the pink dolphins will have to get another habitat. Will the project elevate the standard of living of the Hong Kongers and combat greenhouse problems? We can only find out when the final plans for the project are made public. If you like this video about why Hong Kong is building the world's largest artificial island for $80 billion, then make sure to watch any of the videos on our YouTube channel, Techno Global Innovations. Alright, take care.